Ladies and gentlemen, I am hoping that my voice is actually being amplified to the point where you can hear in the rear. I do want to violate one of the most basic principles of Middle East meetings. Normally, we begin at least 15 minutes late. I apologize for beginning almost at the time the meeting is scheduled. I promise you that we won't do it again. More seriously, I think that we talk a lot in the United States about strategic partnership. One of the problems I think we often have in using that phrase is that we tend to forget that strategic partners have their own priorities, their own strategic needs, and operate often on a somewhat different scale. They have to. They do have different levels of interest from ours, even when they broadly coincide. And at a time like this, where I have rarely seen so much flux and instability in the region, I think it's particularly important to hear from a country that has been a strategic partner as long as Saudi Arabia has, and to get their views of these developments and the uncertainties we face. I will apologize for the fact that we can't anticipate the new crisis that will break out during the time this meeting is taking place. But I wish that statement was a little more facetious than it's been for the last few weeks. In any case, we have two, I think, people who have real expertise. Nawaf Obaid has spoken here before. He has been at the center as well as the Belfer Center at Harvard. I think he has written very extensively and doesn't need a much longer introduction. And I think we are lucky to have Prince Sultan bin Khaled Al Faisal, who has extensive military experience, who has been operational and dealt with these issues on a very practical level. And I think it is often very valuable to have that practical military expertise. So Nawaf, why don't I allow you to start?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tony, for having invited us and for hosting us here. What we're doing the presentation in a bit of a rare way. I'll start with several slides, and then Prince Sultan will come on, and he'll talk about his unique experiences and how he sees the differences between the two wars. Because it's a lot of people, unfortunately, in the U.S. forget that the current war in Yemen, this is the second part to it. The first part started in 2009, where Prince Sultan took a very active role in it. So, as a background to what you see today as Saudi actions and as a Saudi national security and defense perspectives, when the kingdom sees its broad horizons, sees its environment, and sees how events are shaping up in the Middle East, it's basically it's basing its reflections and its actions on several key points. The key points are you would think they're very logical to pursue, because this is what any major country in any region of the world would look at. And they're basically quite clear. Obviously, defending the homeland. More importantly, a state usually has to protect its own citizens, so that's the policy. You have to secure the national interest as well as secure your immediate environment. And in doing that, you have to secure the environment and the well-being of your partner states. In this case, the GCC and certain other countries who make up the coalition today. And more importantly, as this exercise, this doctrine is also geared towards the domestic framework and how national security is implemented in Saudi Arabia. One of the weaknesses where there's been a lot of improvements over the last several years has been the interagency, as you have it in this country as well. But this is something that's more of a domestic issue than something to talk about in a forum like here. So the reasons for this doctrine, or explaining it. And again, a lot of these points are all, if you read the media every day, they're all over the place, one way or another. And the most important one, which really reflects why Saudi Arabia is conducting, for example, leading the war in Yemen or getting involved in other areas of the region, is the last point, which is something that is highly misunderstood, is its centrality as it sees itself, centrality to the Muslim world, and how this factors into national security and defense implementation and programming. And more importantly is where we have a traditional defense doctrine of a state perceiving the threats coming from another state. In this case, in the area today, you have threats coming from non-state actors. And this is something which evolves into the problematics of having to go to war against non-state actors, such as what we have in Yemen today with the Houthis, or such as what we're having in Syria or in Iraq with the Shia militias, and as well as the different variants of the Al-Qaeda networks, be them in Yemen, in Syria, and that devolved into the ISIS phenomenon. But more importantly is, if you look at the points that are up on the wall, these are what defines, and these are the main priorities by which you can look at the lens of how Saudi Arabia will conduct its foreign policy and its national security going forward. But where the question becomes more skewed and becomes more problematic is when you are planning for and presenting a doctrine, at the same time it keeps evolving. And like Professor Kurtzman just mentioned, it evolves into areas where necessarily you would not have looked at, and more importantly, it's happening at such a fast pace that you continuously have to change your priorities and your programming. And so what we have today, that we have a problem where we're thinking about how to react to these unfolding events, which are completely out of control. At the same time, you have a doctrine that has to slowly be implemented, as well as brought to the reality of what's happening on the ground. So as a brief background, this is what I wanted to share. Prince Sultan will take over from here, and he'll get more into the details of what I'm sure you all want to hear about, which is Yemen and how the war is being conducted, and why is Saudi Arabia pursuing such a policy there. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Tony, for having us. Thank you for being here. What I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes is basically the campaign that Saudi Arabia led as part of a coalition, and how the evolving situation came to be as it is today, and maybe a little comparison on the conflict in 2009 with what we have today. What happened in Yemen was that in March, the legitimate government in Yemen fled Yemen. The reason for that was that the Houthis and forces that were loyal to the previous President Ali Abdullah Saleh decided that they were going to take over the country, and they were going to rule Yemen. The government fled. The Houthis took over nearly all of Yemen, except the areas that Al-Qaeda was operating in, and controlled Aden, controlled most of all of the access points in and out of Yemen, and basically shut down Yemen. The government requested Saudi Arabia to intervene. Saudi Arabia had been working for, since before the Ali Abdullah Saleh was forced out of government, with all Yemeni parties to come to an agreement, which ended up at the end with the election of Hadi as president. So they all agreed and decided that this is the way they wanted to go. But then the Houthis decided that they didn't want to play ball, and they wanted the whole piece of cake. So after that, a lot of issues happened. A lot of pressure was being put on the Yemenis to back out, to the Houthis to back out. There were some resolutions from the UN, and then it was obvious that Saudi Arabia had to intervene militarily. There are several reasons for why Saudi Arabia and the coalition decided to intervene in Yemen, and we can go into those later on. But I'll just relay the sequence of events that happened. Saudi Arabia then started an air campaign. That air campaign was made up of several countries, and that was in itself a huge effort and a feat, actually, to be executed by the Saudi armed forces, to be able to organize, manage, and lead that large of an air campaign. In the meantime, Saudi Arabia had, and the coalition started training land forces, Yemenis that wanted to fight on behalf of the government, and train them and equip them. And then there was the next phase of the operations, which was to move in with land forces. Those land forces went in. It was a simultaneous operation with landing in Aden and freeing Aden, as well as coming in from the north east with land forces, and having a two-pronged attack, which ended up in freeing. Today, we have over 75% of Yemen under the legitimate government's control. In addition with that, a huge humanitarian operation was executed as well to land severely needed health care goods, as well as day-to-day goods, food, blankets, and other things, and slowly normalizing life in the areas under the control of the legitimate government. A lot of restoration has gone on, reopening of schools, reopening of hospitals, and bringing equipment into these previously destroyed facilities. Now, what's going to happen next is, in my opinion, and again, I want to state that these are my opinions. This has nothing to do with what the government is planning, or this is my analysis and what I think. I do not represent the Saudi government here. But I think that the same is going to happen, where slowly you move up and take different regions that are still under control of the Houthis. Yesterday, the coalition managed to completely clear Ma'rib of all Houthis. The Bab al-Mandab area was also cleared by using land and naval forces that were able to clear that whole area. And I think the possibility to continue on with what we're doing right now and have successful results is there. It's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think this is going to end very quickly, unless there is a dramatic change in the positions of some of the players. But if it continues on the way it is now, methodical, with purpose, then it takes, these things take time. They don't just happen overnight. What I would like to show here is a little comparison between what's happening now and what happened in 2009. In 2009, it was a different situation. What we had was a group At the time, we knew very little of al-Houthis, although they were very active in Yemen for a long period of time. We really never had any problems with them on our borders in Saudi Arabia. And then all of a sudden, they decided with the tactics that they use, small unit tactics, insurgent type of operations, where they started to have their activities within our borders, harassing our border posts as well as intimidating tribes in the border region. That started a sequence of events that in the end the order was given to move in with the armed forces and eject them off of our lands. And here is where the major difference is between the operations today and the operations back then. Back then, it was the orders were to eject them out of the area of operation or the kingdom's borders. We were not given a mandate to enter Yemeni lands with land forces. So we could only use air and artillery to keep them back away from the Saudi borders, but we only had the mandate to push them to the outside of our borders, but we could not pursue the enemy, so we could have a decisive victory. And this was one of the problems that a lot of our forces had at the time. We would be engaged, but then we would have to stop. And the king at the time, King Abdullah, was very adamant about we are not entering Yemen. So there was that stipulation there, and it was very, very important that we stick by it. But the significant issue there was the move or the realization and the first time we implemented and used special operations on a large scale like this, and the realization by the command of the Ministry of Defense that the use of special operations is very important, and that these kinds of conflicts are very unconventional and need unconventional forces to be able to go against that type of enemy. And it was significant because the success that the Saudi special operations had, whether it was Navy or Army special operations, was very clear to the command. And things that conventional forces were not able to achieve were achieved by a relatively small number of operators with a much lower cost. That caused the Ministry of Defense to somewhat change its policy to develop the Saudi special operations capability, and that became significant in today's conflict. This conflict today relied heavily on the use of special operations, whether it be to gather intelligence or to bolster up forces inside of Yemen and train them and lead them in some cases, doing precision lasing for our air assets and gathering intelligence. That capability is a result of the 2009 conflict. It came out of that we developed and saw the need to develop our special operations capability to that level. Today, I think that Saudi Arabia is going to be more and more involved, I think, in the need to create coalitions. We've talked about this before. Saudi Arabia does not prefer to use its armed forces. but it's never shy to use its armed forces. If it needs to use its armed forces, it's going to use its armed forces. But we prefer a peaceful resolution to any conflict. There are reasons why Saudi Arabia now feels that we are going to need to take care of ourselves in the Middle East. And this is why there's a lot of work being done now to tighten, to stand closer together and solve our problems amongst us and with our own capabilities. The rise of insurgencies and non-state actors in the areas require governments to stand together and move against this kind of causes of instability in the Middle East. And I think as part of that effort, coalitions will be formed. And Saudi Arabia, being a country that is well respected in the region, God has blessed it with resources that a lot of other countries don't have. I'm biased here, but I view Saudi Arabia as an island of stability in a very turbulent area. So you have the support of the people, and I don't think Saudi Arabia would be that stable if it did not have the support of its people. Because as we saw in many other countries, no matter how much you have, you use force against your people, or you're a tyrant, or you're extra liberal, or whatever, if the people don't want you there. And I think the many examples in the Arab world that we've seen during the Arab Spring shows you that at the end of the day, the people have their say. And if the people did not have that level of confidence in their government, and they like the way that they govern, that we wouldn't have had that stability in the country. And that is the reason why Saudi Arabia is in a very good position to be able to move forward with this idea where we in the Arab region are best suited to solve our problems. The disengagement of the West from the Middle East has shown us that it's not nobody's going to come to your rescue if you do not help yourselves and improve the level of stability in the area. Nobody's going to come and do it for you. And I think that is key to Saudi Arabia's policies in the future, to develop its armed forces, develop its capability so that it can support the governments of the region in their bid to control their own destiny. I think I'm going to leave it at that, and we can go to
Thank you
questions.
very much. Before I open things up for audience questions, I wonder if I could ask the two of you to look a little further north. And I think first, give us your impression of what Saudi views are of the Iranian nuclear agreement at this point, and then what developments are now taking place in Iraq and Syria. I don't know which of you would like to begin, but
Okay. To the north of us is a pretty complex situation. We have Iraq, we have Syria, and there's a lot of different issues going on there. Saudi Arabia's view of that is that the issues that, in my opinion, of course, what's happening there is a cause of several things. Anytime you have a power vacuum, you're going to have instability. Now, if you do not deal with that power vacuum immediately, you leave the door open for this kind of turmoil to happen. Now, mix that with the influence of countries that wish to have a hand in what happens in those countries, then it is a recipe for disaster. If you can play on the elements that are conducive to instability, in this case, sectarianism, you're playing on religion and ethnicity, that is just going to be a disaster, and we see this. I believe that the slow response to the power vacuum that happened there, and the mismanagement of what happened in Iraq and Syria is what caused what we have today there. I have my thoughts on the Iranian thing, but let Nawaf go. You take the Iranian issue.
Thank you. The expectation that Saudi Arabia would somehow sit back and see all this unfold and ask for permission to be a witness or to be a spectator at the table is just fantasy. And so the Iranians have decided to do their policy, whatever repercussions they may have, and their limits were clearly shown. I mean, ultimately, they needed the Russians to step in order to save them and save their friend in Damascus, which is fine. I mean, good for them. They planned it well. Now they were able to convince Putin to bring his forces and put them right in the middle of the Middle East. But that doesn't mean Saudi Arabia isn't going to do anything about it. And so if you've been following the comments of the Saudi foreign minister last week, where he clearly laid it out that there will be a response. And the response, as I understand it, is already on its way. So, but ultimately, the bigger picture here is that there are talk about discussions between the two sides, the Saudis and the Iranians. And this, of course, it will come at some point. I mean, at the end of the day, we're neighbors. We live right next to each other, and we'll at some point have to sit at the table. But for the time being, realities on the ground have to change. And the biggest win, Yemen, is for all goods and purposes a done deal in terms of Iranian influence there. There will never be Iranian influence in Yemen again for a very long time. But the more important one is in Syria, because the moment you hit on Syria, and then you can, in a way, start sitting at the table and having a discussion with the Iranians. Because the key one is Syria, because that affects what's happening in Lebanon, and it directly affects what's happening in Iraq. On the nuclear deal, I mean, it's been done. Does that mean, again, we're going to sit down and say thank you and go on with it? Obviously, no. So we're fortunate enough to have had other countries involved in the P5+1 express the same amount of skepticism than we have, which were at the negotiating table with the Iranians. So that's been quite heartwarming for us to see that even them, the people that actually negotiated with them for so long, came out with the same perspective than we do. But we're going to have to see how this develops over the course of the next 6 months to a year. We don't have our hopes high, of course, but I don't think it's a game changer in itself, because Iran has so many issues, so many economic and financial issues, that we're talking about decades before they can really muster some form of power where their official rhetoric meets the reality that they're living in.
Just if I can add something here. I'm a military man, and I like to break down things down to its basics and to the basic elements. We use the term dumb it down. And for me to understand this, the Iranian deal, to me, this is what it looks like. Iran, wait for 10 years. Don't do anything, please, for the next 10 years. We'll give you all you want. We don't want anything from you. You don't have to commit to anything. All you have to do is just please put your nuclear program on hold for 10 years. You can prosper in the next 10 years. And then after 10 years, then we can talk about this again. To us, that's what it looks like. So what are we supposed to do? Take it on face value? Where are the guarantees for us? Do you know what the time is between launch from Iran till impact in Riyadh is? It's 400 seconds. You can count from 1 to 400, and that is the time we have to respond, intercept, and destroy any incoming missile from Iran. You tell us how we're supposed to feel about that. So in our opinion, this deal doesn't look too good to us.
I mean, what Prince Sultan is saying is there is the rhetoric and the narrative that we read in the press and we hear, and you hear certain of your officials here talk about and high-five each other and shake hands and everything is good. And then there's the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is very different from sitting at a table in Vienna and signing a piece of paper. And so, it's just not going to work out for us that way.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me open things up for questions, but if you have wondered what the function of a moderator is in Washington, it is really to prevent people from giving speeches when they should be asking questions. Now, let me say that I'm saying this at a time where you have a magnificent opportunity, if you want to give speeches, to actually run for president on which, by its very nature, has to be done outside of this nonpartisan think tank. We do have a nice reflecting pond, and if you speak loudly, your voice will be heard in the hotel across the street. But quite seriously, I don't want to have to cut people off, but if we can ask one question per person with only a few parts so both of the speakers can remember what the question is and hopefully understand it, I would really appreciate it. I know some of you. I do not know all of you, so I'm going to call upon you by row. When I do that, please give your name and your affiliation before you ask the question. And I see some hands raised already, but the gentleman there, I think in the 6th row.
Stanley Kober. How do you assess the Russian involvement in Syria? I read an article in the Arab News the other day about how good the relations are between Saudi Arabia and Russia, which surprised me at this time. So how do you see that, and what do you expect to do in response to it?
Well, the relations, I mean, we're all nations, and we have to deal with countries as countries deal with each other. We have, in the past week, expressed our concern and our dissatisfaction with the Russian intervention in Syria and called upon Russia to withdraw its troops from Syria. I don't believe that right now just cutting off relations with Russia and disengaging is going to do anybody any benefit. I think we have to engage with them and we have to convince them of our point of view, and indeed of the point of view of many nations, including the United States, that what they're doing is just exacerbating the problem, and it's causing many hardships for a lot of people and just worsening the situation. So I believe engaging with them and putting a lot more pressure is beneficial than just showing that we are unhappy and will not talk.
I wouldn't characterize it as a good relationship. I would say it's a relationship where two countries have realized that they need to talk to each other seriously, because ultimately the biggest threat on the other side of this divide that you're seeing today emerge in the Middle East, the one that's sustaining the other side is not Iran, it's Russia. And we see it again today in Syria. So having this dialogue and having these exchanges of visits, as that they may not ultimately amount to much currently because of the clear standing positions of the kingdom and of Russia on the big issues in the Middle East, it's something that I hope personally will go on for a while.
The gentleman in the blue coat in the back.
I'm Harlan Ullman, an acolyte of Tony Cordesman's view of being harsh but unjust. I have a question for the entire panel. Do you view the situation in Syria today more akin to the Spanish Civil War in 1937, or perhaps Sarajevo just after the assassination in 1914?
You want to try that first?
How's the history?
Just reading up on it, yeah. Definitely not Spanish Civil War because of the regional context. I would go more towards the Sarajevo assassination, but with unknown consequences for what will happen. Now, if we continue down that road, and there is going to have to be a strong Saudi camp reaction to what's happening in Syria. It's unforeseen what could happen. Now, if there is a general war that breaks out, then yes, then your paradigm example is correct. But I don't think we're there yet. I would more put it in a way of phrasing it as there is 1,400 years of reality, which is since the birth of Islam and its expansion across the world. And there's always been a certain reality attached to these 1,400 years. Now, some smart guys in Iran thinks that they're going to change 1,400 years of reality in the space of 10 years because there's a nation state called Iran. And that's where they're making the mistake. It's not going to work. The demographics are clearly they're up against, is not to their favor, very much to the other side's favor. And even with Russian intervention in Syria, there is such reality on the ground that even that's not going to work. So we're somewhere in the middle of what you were saying.
I guess that's me.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the situation degrading and involving more and more countries and ending up like what we had as a result of the assassination in Sarajevo, World War I, I don't think that's going to happen. Could other regional players be drawn in? It could, but I think it would be on a limited scale. The effects I don't think will be as big, but the possibility to have countries being drawn in. I mean, look at the news yesterday. U.S. fighters had to divert in midair because of Russian fighters in the area. Now, forget all of us Arabs down there. What happens if a U.S. fighter shoots down a Russian fighter or a Russian fighter shoots down a U.S. fighter? This is where the worry is. So somebody has to back down. None of the ones that need to back down are the actual Syrians. They're all people coming from everywhere trying to get involved in something, and that is just a power struggle. It's just so we can say who is top dog in the area. It could happen, but not to the level of what you kindly stated as would lead to something like World War I.
I have to say that very briefly that I don't see many parallels. You can always have an incident. Escalating out of an incident, even if it's a serious one, requires a very serious misjudgment on both sides. But I think the deeper problem, Harlan, is the way we are now looking at Syria, which is often in the US to focus on ISIS. But what you have are four different ongoing parties fighting each other: ISIS, other Arab factions, the Kurds, and an ununited faction supporting Assad. And you have it connected to a fight going on in a divided Iraq, which had returned to a state of near civil war before ISIS invaded. You have something I think that's unprecedented in Iraq that we tend to forget. You have more than half the population either as internally displaced persons or as refugees. You have an economy which is probably somewhere around 20% of what it was in 2011. And by the standards of the Arab Development Report, Syria was a failed state in economic terms before this civil conflict began. One of the great problems we have is every step like this is creating more structural problems in a failed state with a population more than 5 times what it had in 1950. And to talk about it in terms of short-term conflict issues, to me, is one of the dangers, because at the end of this, there is no negotiated solution which can move toward recovery in less than half a decade. And as far as I know, no side negotiating this has a recovery plan, which may tell you a little about the success of the steps involved. There is a gentleman here in the 5th row on the side there.
Thank you. In fact, in the coalition that you described there, there's something interesting. There are certain states that are into it, and then there is a possibly. And my question here is about Egypt more particularly. The possibly is a military consideration or a political consideration? And I'm thinking here about the difference you have or the kingdom has today with Egypt seriously on Syria.
No, the reason that possibly is there is that Egypt is involved in some security issues of itself, and it has to and its forces are committed to various different operations, whether it is on the east or in the west. And I think for the foreseeable future, especially with the ongoing Libyan problem, the Egyptians are going to be pretty much have their hands full. So it depends really on the availability of forces that Egypt can contribute to such a coalition. But I have to say that the Egyptian commitment to this new sense of Arab unity that has come about in the area is admirable, and it is I think Egypt is very committed to trying to stabilize the area. I see you do not agree with me, but but listen. There is no problem for people to have different opinions on how to approach a problem. And if Egypt has a different opinion to Saudi Arabia on how to approach the Syrian problem, that's fine. We can sit down and talk about it. The issue that we used to be before, that it's either my way or the highway, you know, the Saddam Hussein way or the Assad way or Muammar Gaddafi way, and I'm the best thinker in the world, and that's it. Nobody else can have a good idea except me. that is going out the door slowly. And I think we understand more and more that we have to sit down, and maybe I don't like all of your idea, but I can take part of it. And I can tell you for a fact, that feeling is out there, because we have had so many failures in the past 100 years, that I think we're finally getting it, okay? We have to cooperate.
Inshallah.
But it's there.
But Joseph, Joseph is a friend of mine, so there is 10,000 meanings to the question he asked. Yeah. For example, Egypt is part of the coalition in Yemen. They have their F-16s there, they're flying, they're committed. And as Prince Sultan said, they also have some serious issues domestically, where their military has never been asked to do so much and be deployed. See, this is sustained deployment of troops on their territories for all the different problems they have. On the issue with Syria, they're not to belittle them, but they're not a central player on the Syrian thing. They do have their opinion, and in some cases they've expressed it in some very odd ways about how they disagree with certain of our policies. But let it be disagreed. It doesn't mean that the two countries are going to fall, their relations are going to fall apart because of that. But again, they are a player, but they are not part of the central players dealing with the Syrian crisis today.
There's a gentleman in the middle of the back there.
Thank you. I'm Professor Beolo from the Aliyah School of International Affairs, formerly of the National War College. And Sultan was my former student at the Commandant Staff College down in Quantico. I'm so happy to see him again.
Good to see you, sir.
The Washington Post this morning is reporting that the Houthis have agreed with the United Nations to withdraw. It didn't really say exactly to withdraw to where, the original point where they started from, up in the north. I was wondering, and the question is addressed to both of you, if you think that offer is sincere, and what can Saudi Arabia do to try to help the Houthis to withdraw to the original place where they started from?
I think Saudi Arabia, very much wishes that they are very sincere in their offer. There is a resolution in the United States, from the UN 1266, which is under Chapter 7, and there is stipulations in there to what the warring factions have to do to stop the combat operations. And sometimes you cannot take what the Houthis say at face value. Now, to where they have to withdraw to where they were before the operations. And the Houthis are part of the society in Yemen. They're part of the political structures. They have to be involved. You can't eradicate them, but they have to do it in a peaceful and democratic way that they have chosen. The people of Yemen have chosen that. So they have to basically put down their weapons, and if they want to win the elections, they can win it through the campaign. But they don't have to win it through a military. But Saudi Arabia would be more than happy if they did go and abide by the resolution. But the resolution is there, and that is the thing that will determine whether combat operations stop or they don't.
But importantly on your question, Professor, is from the perspective of Saudi Arabia, they would rather not have to go all the way. So the issue is not about now that the Saudi coalition has the upper hand, we're going to go and we're going to, have a field day with it. On the contrary, it's very much on the ball. Marib has fallen. Now there is a clear line direct to Sana'a. And if there is a way where the Houthis can come to their senses and agree to the talks and to surrender terms according to the UN Security Council resolution, then all the better. So if it's clear and if they mean it, because these talks have been going on, as you know, for several months now, and nothing seems to have come of it. But if the main objective is to stop hostilities and to get back to the negotiating table, as long as all the terms are accepted by them and Saleh.
The lady in the fourth row then.
Thank you. My name is Leora. I'm from Brookings. My question is, what role would you like to see the U.S. play in Syria and more broadly in the Middle East?
You want to take that one? Was that a question from you or for?
I think that question was directed at the two of you. So,
All right. The United States had a very good chance a few years ago to take a decisive action and literally to stop all of this. I mean, I think Daesh would not be here today had the United States acted when Saudi Arabia urged it to act. It can be more forceful in its requirements of everybody to stand down and of Assad to stop his actions. It can put more pressure, I think, on Iran to pull out and to stop its interference in Syria, and force them to have their subordinates like Hezbollah to go back to their country. What are they doing? What are the Lebanese doing in Syria? The United States has a chance to do that. I mean, I do not think that the United States' political power has waned so much that it cannot handle something like this. The United States is still a great country with tremendous strength. If it wants something to happen, I'm sure it has the political, not just the military, the political and economic weight. It has to want to do it. So I think the United States has a great role that it can play. It just has to want to play that role.
Following on from these remarks, is no one saying for the U.S. to go back to how it was, that they should go ahead and do wars and lose all these soldiers and the cost to the public finances and all that. And this is where you have Saudi Arabia, for example, with all the resources that it's invested in its armed forces, its new doctrine, and so forth, that is willing to play such a role. But at the same time, you can't just have an overbearing U.S. for 50 years in the Middle East and then no U.S. It just doesn't work like that. And what you have, to get to your specific question, which we're more worried about, is the delusions of grandeur that certain countries have today, and specifically Iran and Russia here, where they feed to their domestic audience the weakness and the U.S. is crumbling, and they put pictures of riots in Michigan saying that's the end of the U.S., and where the people believe it. Because they don't have it. They don't watch CNN. They don't watch MSNBC. They believe it. Oh, yeah, look at the riots. That's it. They're shooting police officers. They're shooting at African Americans. So that's it. And one day, there has to be, because everyone is humans, there will be this miscalculation which will trigger something much bigger than what we're seeing today, be it from the Iranians or being from the Russians. And the Russians, by the way, they're behaving. I mean, for example, who would have thought that the Russians are going to tell the U.S., by the way, guys, we're going to go into Syria, as in an hour's time, and we're going to let you guys know by sending a cable to your embassy in Baghdad. I mean, it's gone beyond just a normal state-to-state relationship. We're talking about something very different. And I agree with Prince Sultan. I mean, the U.S. is still the superpower. It's a great nation, and it's built, the most powerful armed forces humankind has ever known. So we're very confused.
Gentleman there on the left.
Yeah, David Disby. Prince Sultan, I see you have up there on the view graph 152 F-15 essays, yet that program is a year late, and so far none of that particular type of aircraft have been delivered. Indeed, questions have been raised that can the Saudis both incorporate that and other high technology weapons it is invested in. At the same time, it is dealing with the more pressing problems in Yemen and elsewhere, how will the Saudis be able to bring in the 15SA and other aircraft?
I don't see a problem. I don't think Saudi Arabia has ever, the Saudi Arabian Armed Forces has ever had a problem with any weapon systems we've decided to buy. I think Saudis are fairly capable of dealing with any technology that's out there. We are able to train our people, and I think our ground crews are some of the best ground crews that maintain fighter aircrafts in the world. And I really fail to see why we cannot handle 152 F-15s.
The lady over, sorry, did
Can
you
I
want
just
to
say
go ahead?
something
Sure.
about the gentleman's question? The delay, from my understanding, is more to do with the American side. So, yeah.
Let's see, the lady on the right, please.
Okay. Diane Perlman, George Mason School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. First of all, I think that I read in recent months that there were some beginning initiatives of diplomacy or communication between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And my question is that, what you presented is pretty much 100%, military, kinetic, sort of black and white, which from perspective of conflict dynamics and social science can only escalate. So my question is, if you could imagine in 10 years, if there was some kind of third-party mediation or aims at analyzing the underlying conflict and working to reduce some tension and resolve some conflicts, what could you imagine could be, say, a best-case scenario where you're not worried in 10 years that everything is going to be like it is now? And also answer if there is some negotiations beginning.
Okay. There is nothing that holds back Saudi Arabia and Iran from negotiating. We don't need a third party to come and mediate between us. We know our problems. They know their problems. We've met many times. We've tried to iron out our differences. But there is always this rhetoric from the Iranian side that they always escalate issues. And there is the fact on the ground of Iranian meddling and involvement in destabilizing of Arab countries. We have Hezbollah in Iran. You have the sectarian violence in Hezbollah in Lebanon. The sectarian violence and the total dominance of Iranian influence in Iraq. You have the Iranian forces and Iranian instructors and Iranian money and Iranian influence all over Syria. And then you had Iranian intervention and meddling into the affairs of Yemen. And that is a clear and present danger to Saudi national security. And it's all, they're not shy of saying, and again I say this is not from their official sources, but from people in government who tweet things, people from their parliament who state issues, and people from the from the Revolutionary Guard who have stated some aggressive statements towards the kingdom and what they want to see happen in the kingdom. So there isn't an issue for us to sit down and talk. The problem is right now, the rhetoric is so high from Iran that it is not conducive to sitting down and talk. Now, the issue of this being very military and as you said, black and white, and because I am talking here about the military side of the Saudi capability. There are many sides, and I stated in the beginning that Saudi Arabia prefers its diplomatic and religious and economic influence, and starts with that and will pursue that till the end, till there is absolutely no possibility. We don't like to fight, but we don't shy away from a fight. And the reason I'm talking about the military is that I'm talking about the military side of it. And I'm not an economist, and I'm not a political person.
I mean, No, the thing I think, several days ago, an Iranian general from the Revolutionary Guard found nothing better to do than to go on Iranian press and say, Iran has the world's fourth largest missile force, and we're ready to use it against Saudi Arabia. Okay? So imagine if a Saudi general stood up and said, we have the region's best air force, we're ready to use it over Tehran. But we don't do it. We try to explain that we're not going to get into that game. We will do it by showing what we have and what we're ready to counter. Doesn't mean that we're going to use it. You know, these crazy, ridiculous, absurd comments don't help the situation. They only make it worse and worse. So normally, any country that hears it repeatedly from officials, because he is an official, he is a two-star general, or a non-military that says similar things, obviously the country has to prepare itself. I mean, it has to be coming from somewhere.
I'm sorry. Okay. Let's see. The young lady in the back there.
My name is Rebecca. I'm with the Hudson Institute. I'd like you both to speak to Saudi Arabia's reluctance to engage with the refugee crisis in Syria, and if that's going to change soon, what situation you see that might changing, anything like that.
Thank you very much. This whole issue of Saudi Arabia not engaging in the Syrian refugee problem is, I think it's a gross injustice to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has more than 1.5 million Syrians in Saudi Arabia that have come to Saudi Arabia since the beginning of the conflict. Now, the fact that we do not build refugee camps and have them pinned up in the desert somewhere is not to detract from our efforts. We give them working visas. They work in Saudi Arabia. The children are in schools. And you are more than welcome to just Google it and see the comments of the Saudi government on exactly what it is doing for Syrians in Saudi Arabia. And I'm not talking the Syrians that are in refugee camps in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Turkey, and inside of Syria, and what we're doing for them, but what we have done for Syrians inside Saudi Arabia. They are being treated now in a way that is not given to any other Arab national coming to work in Saudi Arabia. They can come, they can live, they have working permits, working visas, and nobody asks them how long they're going to stay. They don't have it's open-ended. So Saudi Arabia has done a lot for them. We don't call them refugees, and we don't treat them as refugees. And I mean, I just feel that it's a gross injustice for that what you see today in the media with this attack on Saudi Arabia, because frankly it just tells you that somebody didn't do any research. I mean, they wrote this, but have they come and asked the Saudis? And Saudi Arabia didn't wait for anybody to ask it. It has stated this in many occasions, and it's in all public forums and all public statements from the Saudi government.
I think the question, because it's central to a lot of the coverage that's been happening recently, is there are two stories here. The first story is about the Syrians already in Saudi Arabia because of their family, because of the initial native Syrian population that was living in Saudi Arabia before the uprisings, which was around 300,000 at the time. So it was still large, and then add-ons came and families, extended families, and so forth. But the question relates to what is Saudi Arabia doing now with this new wave of migrations towards Europe. So it's two different things. Unfortunately, the narrative that's come out in the media is that they've lumped the two together, and they said, well, because Saudi Arabia hasn't come out and taken any refugees in, it's not doing anything. And so that's where the confusion lies. On the level of the migration issue, no one predicted it. It's a disastrous, it's horrible what's happening. And what you find yourself is you find yourself a country that how do you convince refugees not to want to go to a certain area of the world today, whilst, with no preparation, no equipment, and so forth. Yet what the Saudis are doing, what's been happening in the last several weeks, is that they've been trying to seek out families in Saudi Arabia to try to gear whoever is leaving or is in Turkey stuck about to go, to see if there's a way, consular way, to get them into Saudi Arabia. But these are small numbers because of the programming and the logistics that happens. But again, stressing Prince Sultan's issue, because I've been dealing with it for the last several weeks out of London, and it's you find that it's not so much a question of what is happening on the ground, but let's say there's a narrative and we're going to go with it. I'll give you the last example, and this is a terrific, this should be taught at universities, this example. So a newspaper in Beirut decided to come up with a story saying, the Saudis are really bad, they're horrible, they're not even going to help these refugees, but they're going to go and build 200 mosques in Germany. So a newspaper in Frankfurt picked up that story, although they should have known that this is a newspaper that's funded completely by our best friends in Lebanon, the Hezbollah people, which we like a lot. So that story then picked up by the Independent, and it runs at a front page cover. The Saudis are not helping, they're funding 200 mosques. So let's forget where the source came from. This is now fact. The Saudi government is asked to comment on something that it didn't even say, or that there's no plans for it. I'm like, where's this coming from? So they can't comment on something they didn't initially say. And so when finally the Saudi embassy in London responds to it and says, well, guys, it's not true, the story dies. But no one bothered writing a story on the story and saying, well, guys, this never happened in the first place. So today, in the general sphere, Saudi Arabia is building 200 mosques in Germany. Fantastic.
I think we are moving toward last question time. There seem to be quite a lot of potential last questions. Let me try. I'm going to give the two gentlemen in that row the chance to ask a couple, and perhaps if you can make them very brief, we'll ask our two panelists to try to put them together. So.
Sure. Warren Strobel with Reuters. The oil price has slid about 40%, give or take, in recent months. There was a report, I believe, that the government in Riyadh is going to freeze spending for government departments. I'm just wondering to what extent that will impact Saudi weapons purchases and this attempt to develop a more expansive defense doctrine, or is the national security and defense sector sort of immune? Thanks.
Hi, my name is Fahad Nazar. I'm a political analyst here, based here in DC, previously with the Saudi embassy also here. My question is for Your Highness. As you know, Al-Qaeda has one of its most dangerous franchises in Yemen. There's every indication that ISIS is also trying to establish a beachhead in Yemen. I'm wondering, is it at all possible for Yemen to establish any level of stability as long as those franchises are allowed to run wild or have free reign? And would the kingdom be willing to pursue them now that it does have a presence in Yemen? Thank you.
Gentlemen?
I'll take the Al-Qaeda thing, you take the... I'll take the easy ones. Yes, Al-Qaeda is definitely active, and Daesh is also active in Yemen. Our hopes are that the new government and the new establishment that will come out of this conflict will take the combating Al-Qaeda in Yemen more seriously. The previous government was actually part of the problem. They did not pursue Al-Qaeda and try to drive them out of Yemen as diligently as they could have. With all the support that was being given by the US and Saudi Arabia to fight Al-Qaeda, and I'm talking before this conflict, they did not pursue it. They pretty much left it to the device of the Americans, and if they want to deal with it, they can deal with it. But they're not gonna put an effort into it. I think today we look forward to the new government in Yemen to pursue that issue more diligently, and I'm sure Saudi Arabia will put in any help that the government of Yemen will need in order to handle that situation.
Hi, Warren. The budgets that are part of the expansion of the Saudi Arabia's military capabilities have already been put into the budget from previous years ago, excuse me. And so they're already planned in the budget. So there's no new expenditures in dealing with what we've been talking about. So it won't be affected. For example, the F-15 SA program, I mean, we're talking about a program that was signed nearly 10 years ago. Yes, it's true. There's been circular about freezing current any excessive expenditures until the end of the year. That is true. But on the defense side, a lot of what you see today, putting aside the Yemen war, has already been planned, and a lot of it already has been spent from previous budget. Now, in the Yemen war, the interesting thing is that the actual cost of the Yemen war is not that big. It's actually quite small, because the equipment's already there. What you're basically paying for is the fuel and the ammunitions. And the ammunition cycle, a lot of it had already been bought from the previous budget. So again, you only have very small in terms of national security excess expenditures for this year. But overall, yes, definitely this is going to affect the layout for 2016 and 2017 about what programs can be signed off on and what programs have to be delayed until the oil price picks up. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to thank our two panelists in the usual manner.